Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm still waking up. I had to make sure I was here though.
There you go. There you go.
How are you? How is everyone? Vero, how are
Hey,
you?
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Did you get the information we sent you?
Which information? Which one? No.
The
I,
one.
I probably I probably received, and I had a tough week. My grandmother accidentally burnt herself, like set herself on fire. So I was like, I'm not missing Saturday.
Oh,
How
no,
she
I'm
did-
sorry to hear that.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. She's 92. So um I just been I'm like, I just wanna make sure I'm here.
Yeah, I love the abuelitas.
Yes.
Mhm.
Hold on, I'm still looking for let's
Awesome.
look at
Buenos dias, EJ.
Hey, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yes,
Just
sir.
good.
What's going on, bro?
Not much. Let me just get everything set up here. Let's see. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, man. It wasn't this week. It was last week in regards to tithing.
I didn't get it. And I was following you on YouTube anyway.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
follow you on YouTube and on your social media because I want to make sure you see support.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
I don't ever go on there, but I mean, like,
Vero does
I'm
everything.
his social media.
yeah, like I've never been on there personally, so I never, she set it up for this part of it, I guess you could call it, but so I'm never
Yeah.
really, yeah, okay, yeah, because I wanted to follow up with you and send you the information so that you understood where it came from and why it was. So
I think I emailed it.
I think she emailed it to you maybe about 2 weeks ago. It was maybe because when I told you about it on Saturday, so it was probably like maybe that Monday or Tuesday or something of that
I,
next.
I have so many emails from the Mental Academy.
Oh, do you?
I'm going to just sit down and search it all.
Okay. Yeah, because it was, but you'll know it because it'll probably be it's like a couple days after that Saturday.
Okay, no problem. I
But I,
love that one. That one, I felt like that one, I felt like I was actually in church. Usually I come in here and I'm like, yes. But that one, I was like, okay, I got the word. This has to be spread even more.
yeah, well, that's so because I always like you all to know where the information comes from. This is not a indoctrination camp. This is not somebody just come and listen to me or just believe me or yes, bienvenido, Carlos. Welcome, brother. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Um, it's important that you guys know where the information comes from because a lot of us, most people want to live well, but most people don't have enough information to do it.
Yes, you've always shared your information, not just your insight, and I've always appreciated that. That's why I usually just send your link out, and people will be like, "What am I zooming into?" Just zoom in. Don't even ask.
Let
Yeah.
me know if you can't find it, and then um I'll send it over.
No problem.
Yeah, again. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was when I was still in Puerto Rico too, so around that time.
I don't see it. I looked
Okay.
up everything from even just Vero, and I don't see it.
Okay. I think I may have sent it from the info at the mental academy, but I'll resend it. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just always important to me that you all know. See, it's like this information is like a person. You have to not only know what someone says, you have to know what they mean. Right.
Yes.
And a lot of us can recite things that we've heard, so we can recite things that were said, but most of us are not taught really what they mean, whether at all or truthfully. Not necessarily that people lied on purpose, but that most often just the information is either incorrect or insufficient. It's not thorough, right? So that is why, like today, the speaker we have coming on here, EJ, like it is important for me. It's always important not only to have people whomever is speaking to you, whether it's me or somebody I bring on to speak, that not only do they say what they say and know what they know, but they show you where it comes from.
Yes.
That you can look it up for yourself, research it for yourself, understand it for yourself in your own time, in your own way, but that you're not just following somebody or just believing something because we live our lives based on our information. And like I said, most of us don't have enough of it to live as well as we would like to. So it's always important that you are not, most people are I wrote something last week that is literally what I mean. And I said, I said to someone, I said, oh, I think I sent, I don't remember who else I sent this to, but I said, you can't learn if whom you're listening to isn't teaching. Emotion has
Mm.
long been substituted for information. Emotion with no information leads only to opinion. Opinion leads to tradition. Tradition leads to customs. Information is then locked out and never sought. Only the continuous cycle and infinite circle of ignorance exists. Right? So people just will tell you what they heard. They'll tell you what they've always been doing. They'll tell you they'll tell you a whole bunch of things, but they can't tell you why. They can't tell you when you start asking them questions, it just dissolves like graham crackers and milk. They
Yes.
just break down quick because they have no ownership of their experience. They're just participating, and they think because they're an adult that they own it, but you're not. You're still a child in the sense of you are participating with no knowledge, awareness, understanding, information, so that you have no ownership in it, right? So everybody on here that I bring is going to sound like me, meaning you're going to know very quickly they know what they're saying. And they'll show you where they're saying it. They'll tell you why they're saying it. They can tell you why they said this instead of that, why they prefer this or prefer that. You don't have to like it and you don't have to agree, but you will never be emotionalized. You'll never be instead of informed. You'll never be, on here made to feel good instead of to know better, right? To have an understanding of knowledge, right? So all those things are wonderful and important. So good, you'll get the information and then you'll see where it comes from. You'll see why I said what I said, and then you'll have a real understanding of really what that particular thing is about.
Sent you a text, so let me know if that's not your number anymore.
Me?
Yeah.
Hold on. I got two phones.
Yeah, EJ, when I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking to myself, what? It just I had just my own questions kind of popped up. Curious just from your own experiences of what you've seen in your own industry. So, I can't wait to get my question off.
Yeah, for sure. Ask them all.
Mhm.
Ask them all. Deal with some very interesting people. So a lot of stories and a lot of journeys I've been on with clients. So it's interesting. It's fun though.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Mhm. It's so funny? Like I look at everything and not in judgment or criticism, but I look at everything because for me, I'm like, I'm like a life mechanic, meaning like I'm one of those people that likes cars, so to speak, that's always tinkering in their driveway, right? And it's like nothing wrong with the car. You just like being out there under the hood. Like I feel that way about life. Like I'm always trying to figure out like, oh, what do I think about this? Or why is that happening? Or I wonder what I'm always tinkering, right? So while tinkering, I'm also always observing. I'm always like, well, I wonder. And so like just imagine if you could go to like a place that like if you could go somewhere early and go to if you go somewhere early and see Tony Robbins, right? Let's say, or you could go like tailgating in sports, like you get somewhere early and just imagine the players would come out and talk to you before the game. And you could, don't you think people would get there early? Like, wouldn't it, I always wonder when there's places like this giving information or other places why people don't get there early to be like, man, I wonder if I could talk to somebody, if I could run into somebody. I wonder, like, you just never know. And to me, I was talking to actually my other brother who's on here, Marcus. I was talking and I remember saying to him, what was I saying? I remember saying, what was I saying? Um, well, my point is that I just remember, I remember thinking to myself, like, I wonder why people don't try to get places and ask questions early. Or, oh, that's what I was saying. It's like, from my experience, when I'm doing, as long as I've been doing these, one thing I realized is that people don't actually know how to learn. Most people actually don't know how to learn. Most people don't actually participate in their education. They'll go in class and they'll sit down, they'll wait for somebody to talk to them, talk at them, and then they'll take as many notes as they take or whatever, and then leave. And then they'll come back and then they'll come back whenever their time, but whenever it's time. But most people don't study what they heard. Most people don't ask enough questions while they're there. So they're there, but they're not actually participating in their own education. So at best, all they have is it's like their information is like an Airbnb. It's like a rental. They only know it long enough to give it back, but they don't know it long enough or well enough to live on it, right? Because they don't actually take ownership of the education, because they don't actually take ownership of the moment where they're being educated. It doesn't matter how good or bad the teacher is. They got a degree. They're getting a check whether you know it or not. They know the information whether they can convey it to you well or not. But most people sit there and expect the teacher to be perfect and their studentship is imperfect. They're either not there on time, not paying attention, sleep, didn't study, not prepared to learn, talking in class, don't take notes, don't study when they leave, and then they wonder, then they'll blame it on the teacher because they're not doing well or didn't do well, right? So I always wonder, it's like, if you have access to something or to someone, especially that you either normally don't or that really is playing a significant role in your life for that moment, you better try to get, for me, it's like you better try to get as much access to that person, go to the teacher's office hours, do whatever you have to do, right? To get as much access to that person whose information you're relying upon to live a good life, right? If you're spending your time there, it's just always interesting to me how people, because of the way we've grown up learning, don't know how to learn. They don't learn well, right? They don't. So especially as adults, we take all those the way we learned as young people, and we pretty much carry them into adulthood. So, and most people aren't great students, right? So then, how do you think you're gonna be great at life if you don't know how to acquire information and take it from someone else's mind and make it a part of your mind, right? To the same level and extent that you can live on. So I always found that interesting how people.
Coach Lucky, I didn't give you permission to start reading my book, but but I will say, as a student, I learned that, and this is only my point of view, I can't speak for other people. When I was in school, especially college, the point was to get a passing grade. Like, it wasn't necessary. It was just that you learn in school that you have to pass that grade in order to move on to the next grade. So you just need whatever information to pass that test that your teacher is giving you. Once you get that material that the teachers get, even though you get even more, you just need to get that information. And that's what you learn. And you grow up learning that. I just need the information to pass that particular test to get on to the next class so I can have that grade. But it wasn't until I read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, that other people's mindset, like it clicked. And again, this is just my opinion. Think and Grow Rich, he said, people do not value information they don't pay for.
Mhm.
And at first it was okay, if you're not paying for your college, obviously, I thought it was physical money. But if you're not paying for your school or you're not paying for this, you don't feel the burn because now it's affecting something else. But then as I got older, I realized it was no, if you're suffering and you are not like moving up, you're literally paying for this. And because you're not paying for the information that you're receiving, it doesn't sit in your head. It'll come back to you once you start paying for it. If it's like, oh, wow, I remember learning something in school. Let me go back to my books. Let me go back to my textbooks. Let me go back to something, maybe a YouTube video, because now I'm suffering from it. Now I'm going through something. Now I'm actually in this position. There's something that on the job, or in the field, or however you want to name it. Um, I really do need to apply, but that wasn't enough for that test in that moment.
Right. Yeah, we'll definitely, well, that's well said, and we'll definitely get into it. And that's basically called ignorance tax. That's what it's like. It's an actual term, ignorance tax.
Okay.
And ignorance is the cause of all sin, all error, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tax to error, to improper, incorrect thinking, right? So there's always a cost to it. And people, when you don't know better, you'll find out better. So later on, but all right, we're gonna get to it. Happy Saturday, everyone! Glad everyone is here. I am going to talk for maybe 2 minutes, introduce our guest, our first guest ever on the Mental Academy Saturdays, and we're going to let him take it over and keep it moving. So, this guest today is my youngest brother, actually, and he is probably the titan of us all as far as every generation is supposed to be better than the next. And he is pulling up the rear, making his way to the front, and he is an example of how I like things to be done, where someone has an experience, someone can articulate that experience, someone can show you what the information is, why it is, how it is, where to get it for yourself, and be able to help you understand something that they do in a way that you can make it beneficial for yourself. So that is what he is going to be doing. I'll let him tell you about himself and about what he does. I'll give a lightweight disclaimer. He is on here to help us all. If he's not working with any of us individually. So this is not information for you to come and quit your job and jump off the roof and be Bitcoin master all of a sudden after this call. It's not designed for that. It's just designed for us to get access to information from someone at a level that most of us don't actually get it from, right? For free, without them beating you over the head for a subscription or money, or come to my calls or my classes now. Somebody who's going to give you very high level information from a very high level location, for us to start being able to think about things, in this case, the financial area, the way we think about the mind overall. So with that being said, EJ, I'll let you take it away and do your thing.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Great to be here with you all this morning. As you mentioned, my name is EJ Fortenberry. I work at a firm called Alliance Bernstein, just to give you some background. We're an asset manager. We manage about $800 billion across the globe. I sit here in our private wealth or family office division here in the US, where we manage about $150 billion across the US. I sit on a team here on the West Coast where most of my clients in the family office, investment management, wealth advisor world are typically two types of people. Most of who I work with are either athletes, entertainers, influencers. I came from the athlete world, played sports in college, and so I've had a good network there. But then also just your wealthy family, your wealthy individual, your wealthy founder who has gone through some sort of liquidity event and transition. And so again, my focus when I work with them is typically on the investment management side of things. And so actually figuring out, what's going to be the growth engine in their portfolios, how to invest, when to invest in certain different asset classes, things of those nature. So before I get into it, and before I talk to you about some of the things I have in my presentation here, wanted to take a minute to first see if there were any burning questions that anybody had right off the bat, if there was anything that you wanted to make sure I covered at some point during the presentation. My real goal today is to first just talk about some of the behavioral side of investing and some of the pitfalls that people typically fall into as they start to think about investing in stocks or bonds or things of that nature, or Bitcoin, as Lucky said. Again, quick disclaimer here that there's no get rich quick scheme. That is not how investing works. It is a very disciplined process, and you have to be patient. But again, I think when you put a plan and a process in place, you can see real success, and you can see real results. So again, before I get into it here, anything that anyone wanted to make sure I covered today, I can talk about trading. Yes, I'll talk about trading a little bit. Let me just write that down. And are you referencing just day trading, kind of typically every day, just logging into account, buying and selling?
Just the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts for
Okay.
newbies. Yeah, because I hear a lot of people talk about trading, but
Yeah.
they all go through ups and downs, and so just kind of you can kind of just go into that from your perspective.
Yes, no problem. Anything else before I get started here? Just check in the chat to see if there's anything else. Cool. All right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The I did have a question. It's not something I know, but I think it's great to share, especially that this will be going online. But the strength of budgeting, like what the strength of budgeting, it's like not just trading, but you're talking about money, period.
Yep.
So like the mindset of money, the strength of budgeting, the relationship of money. Why is it so important?
Yep.
If you wasn't going to talk about those things before.
Absolutely. No problem. Yeah, I'll get to that at kind of in the second portion of the class. And then I see trusts. Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, I will get started. I'll make sure we hit on these things as we go. But let me just share my screen here really quick. Life insurance. Okay. Awesome. You can keep going if you want. Feel free to just leave them in the chat. And like I said, as I go, I'll kind of get to them.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I
Nope.
know you just said life insurance, but from my experience from dealing with other people, maybe the importance of knowing when that life insurance, you're not able to collect necessarily from life insurance like that if you're not paying towards it. Like you have to,
Correct.
the difference, because some people are thinking term life, you can collect from it, and you're not necessarily collecting from term. You have whole, and then there's a difference between the difference whole life. Like some people are just like, oh yeah, you can make money off a universal life insurance claim, and it's just
Yep.
like, no, it's not. So the which is universal life insurance, Sparkle Bailey, and good morning, sweetie. It's like, oh, well, you have to pay a certain amount before you just literally start benefiting off of it. Understanding like there's a cost you have to put out. Most people would say, oh, it's money and it's infinite banking, but it's not necessarily that, if you don't mind touching that.
Sure. No problem. Awesome. All right. So I will try to save some of those, especially kind of the trust insurance topics towards the end. But the budgeting and the trading I'll probably get to at some point during the actual presentation. So like I said, but before I really got into talking about investing and stocks and bonds and when these things are useful and how to use them, et cetera, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the behavioral side of investing because I think it is important. Because like I said before, you have to have a disciplined approach to it. And if you let your emotions and you let your biases get in the way of that, you will make knee-jerk reactions that can actually be very, very detrimental to yourself. So as far as learning objectives for this first portion, so just getting familiar with some of the biases that you might have, understanding various trade-offs of those biases and how they might affect investing, and then just how to overcome common mistakes and pitfalls as you think about investing and as you think about building a portfolio per se of stocks and bonds, which are basically just your basic building blocks of any investment portfolio. So I think the first thing to realize when it comes to investing success is understanding that your brain is not pre-wired for investing success, right? So we have one side of our brain, which is the reasoning side, which is kind of the cause and effect of relationships, planning, self-awareness, observation. It's the reasoning portion of your brain. Then you have this second piece, which is the instinct part of your brain, right? So this is your feelings, your physical actions, your fight or flight. And I think understanding that the greatest challenge investors face, the greatest challenge any person with money faces as they think about investing, budgeting, etc., is avoiding how to succumb to these impulsive parts of the brain that force us to react in certain situations or force us to react emotionally when we need to react with reason or logic or data-backed decisions, right? And so we typically see these emotional biases come up when investing in four different ways. There's the fight or flight, loss aversion, anchoring, and data frequency. And so the fight or flight is just this instinctual choice that we make when we all feel threatened, right? So that's the typical example you've all heard, right? Of you walking down a dark alley, you see someone on the other end, and you have two choices really. You either continue to move forward and you are ready to fight and defend yourself, or you have this reaction to run and flee to safety. And I think we see that a lot when it comes to investing, where investors might see headlines. They might see, for example, in March, we saw Trump's Liberation Day be announced, and that sent the market into a tumble. It sent it into a really, really steep downturn where the market lost 20% in 2 weeks. Meaning, if you had $10,000 at the beginning of that year, by the end of March and beginning of April, you were down to $8,000 in your portfolio, which is a fairly big loss, right? That is a knee-jerk, really, really big reaction. I'm sure anybody on this call, if they open up their statement or their bank account statement and saw that they had lost $2,000 in a matter of weeks, would be very, very shocked. But that's the reality of the stock market. Those things happen, and I will say they happen a good amount of time, right? And so getting away and understanding that the fight or flight does come into play when you're investing, I think is really, really important. And then figuring out how to keep yourself from making those reactions, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is also the next step of avoiding that pitfall. Next is the loss aversion idea and thought. And this is that thought where, I think if you're an athlete, you've kind of gone through this at some point, right? Or if you played sports, that feeling of a loss is far greater than the feeling or the joy that you might get from winning or a game. And this is something, again, where a lot of our clients that I work with, a lot of the people that I've seen or spoken to, will have these really, really big reactions when and they experience a loss, or their fear of a loss will keep them from doing something. It'll keep them from investing in the stock market. I can't tell you how many, and a lot of times I will say it's typically the root of it is typically either misinformation or just lack of education. But there are so many people who go through this, what we call sudden wealth syndrome, right? A lot of times you see it truthfully with athletes, entertainers, people who come from little to nothing and have this really large event where they come into a ton of money and they're scared, they're nervous, they don't know what to do, right? So they don't invest, they don't seek out professional help, they don't, talk to the right people. They end up just kind of stashing their money in a mattress or in a bank account for 10, 20, 30 years because they're nervous and they don't know that they can actually invest and grow their money. And we see that again a lot of times with people that don't understand how the stock market works, how to invest, what certain asset classes are used for. And so I think really having a really dialed in, disciplined approach to investing really keeps people away from making these kind of emotional reactions as they're investing, or emotional reactions that they might see these big headlines in the news or in the stock market. I think next I'll talk about a little bit is anchoring. And this is that idea that people take a singular experience that they've gone through and allow it to affect every single thing that they do related to that experience going forward, whether there's new information or not, right? We saw this a ton during 2008, which was the global financial crisis. I have so many clients who have lived through that time period, and anytime they hear whispers of a recession, anytime they hear whispers of a market correction, which is basically just the market taking a tumble or going from a really big high to some sort of low, they are calling me. They're asking me if they should take their money out of the stock market, if they should take their money out of just investing in general. And a lot of times I have to talk them off that ledge, but it's because they've lived through quite a traumatic experience, honestly. I actually have a chart in my office in Citrus City that has the returns during the 2008 financial crisis, and there were portfolios down over 50 or 60%. So again, taking that example I used earlier, you had $10,000 at the beginning of the year. By November, you had $6,000, $5,000, sometimes even $4,000. Again, which can be a very traumatic experience where, you know, a lot of us are used to looking at bank accounts and it's very easy to tell money goes in, money goes out, the balance goes down only when you take money out. But imagine having that feeling of not being able to control how much the balance goes up and how much the balance goes down, right? So a lot of people have these anchoring experiences where they take this singular event and allow it to affect how they make decisions going forward. Um, and you have to be able to not have that happen, not let those things creep into decision making as you move forward. And then lastly, I'll talk about just quickly data frequency, which is this idea that we're influenced by the amount of information that we get on a day-to-day basis, right? So a big one, which Lucky mentioned earlier, is cryptocurrency. For about 5, 6 years, the last 5, 6 years, I haven't had a conversation with especially clients that are on the younger side who haven't talked to me about crypto. Should they be all into it? Should they, sell all their other assets and just purely buy into crypto? But it's because you've seen these enormous headlines over the last 5 to 10 years about people making millions of dollars in crypto, which to some degree is true. It's very, very real. But what they're not telling you is the 90 to 95% of all the other stories of the regular other people that are losing tons and tons of money in crypto or don't understand how to allocate towards crypto assets. It can be very, very confusing, and crypto is very volatile. It goes up really high, but it goes down really, really, really low, and it could happen in a matter of weeks. And so let me pause there. I know I just threw a lot at you guys and see if there's any questions, but wanted to kind of start to talk about some of those emotional biases that people come into investing with. And then we'll talk about how to avoid them and what it really takes to build a good plan for success going forward. And if there's no questions, I can keep going.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Leslie Wright, and I own a
Hi.
company called Bearcat Body Care Essentials.
Mhm.
And you said that that people don't look for the right people.
Mhm.
And my question is, when they come into money, they're not looking for the right people to give them advice. If you're not led to the right people, how would you identify the right people?
I will say that is a really big part of the battle. You have to do your research. I will say typically, you see, I'll take my experiences, for example. A lot of the athletes you work with are surrounded by agents and people of that nature. And so it's actually having the conversations with agents and the people on your professional teams to help lead you to the right people. So whether you have an accountant, a lawyer, asking those people who are in those professional services sectors that most times have good relationships with other people that can give you that advice. I think that's where you have to start, is seeking out other professionals that you know in the industry. I'm sure, you mentioned you have a business. I'm sure someone does your taxes for your business. Asking that person, hey, do you have a wealth advisor, or do you have someone I can go to for advice? Most people do. But really starting with your network first, but then really it's doing a lot of your own research at times, I think, to educate yourself to some degree as well. But start with your network and then really think about educating yourself and looking at resources online. I will say the internet has evolved so much. I mean, AI is doing really great things, and I can touch on that a little bit later as well. But AI has really changed the game, and there's so much information at your fingertips in a matter of seconds, where you can literally Google any question, and now Google will provide you an AI answer, which typically is pretty good. So, yeah, I would say those two things. Start with your professional services network, ask them for resources, and then just doing some of your own research to kind of backfill some of those gaps as well.
Would you recommend using wealth advisors at your financial institution?
Absolutely, yeah. If you have access to wealth advisors, they're great resources and are a wealth of knowledge, and that this is what they do, right? Exactly what I do is help you invest your money, help you come up with plans, and um, help you reach, think about your goals first of all for investing, but then help you align your investing with those goals so that they all come together at the end of whatever plan you might want to achieve. Great question. I'm going to answer the why do you only invest in US stocks question now, because this year in particular is a great reason why we don't only invest in US stocks. So I think we've seen, or if you are familiar with the stock market, the last 5 years on average have been incredible. 2022 was an anomaly where the market was down about over 20%. But we've seen Google, we've seen Meta, we've seen Tesla, we've seen all of these kind of larger Apple stocks, right? Kind of be really, really big components to the growth in the stock market. And so those are all US companies, and US companies have done very, very well. So this year, though, that took a turn. Like I mentioned earlier in March, when Trump announced Liberation Day, which was a number of tariffs that he put on a number of countries, the market slid almost 20% in 2 weeks. Year to date, the stock market, the US stock market, is up about 17%. International stocks right now are up almost 40. So this is a really, really big year, and reason why we would circle this year to say diversification to asset classes is so critical, because nothing lasts forever. Not one asset class will always be successful. Again, I talked about crypto. Crypto this year is down, right? And everybody, for the longest time, you couldn't tell them anything about crypto. Crypto was the next big thing. You put all your assets in crypto, right? But this is a year where crypto is negative and every other stock market is positive. And so diversification of assets is so critical to investing success, which I'll talk about kind of in part two of my discussion with you guys. You have to be diversified because you just don't know when markets will take a turn. I was just watching this morning some news about, now they're saying tech is going to take a very big turn. This was one of the first weeks or months where we saw tech being Google stocks, Tesla stocks, anything that has some sort of technology as a really big component of its business, really take a tumble and really get hit. There's a lot of questions about how much people are investing into AI right now, or artificial intelligence. There's questions about, is it overvalued? Are we kind of at a bubble like we were with 2008 in the real estate market, or 2000 with the dot-com crisis, right? So we all, or some of us, I'm sure, probably remember early 2000s, the dot-com boom was on. There were so many companies making money, creating websites and building things, but that came crashing down very, very quickly in the early 2000s. And people feel like right now with AI, because of the craze, because there's been so much discussion about it, right? We're at this moment in time where there is a lot of questions about how AI will be used going forward. And if people are over investing in it, and if valuations based on that investment are too high. And so that could cause a real big market correction and shift. So again, I think when you think about investing, the most successful investors, from the Warren Buffetts of the world to everybody else, they are diversified through asset classes and have allocations or have money in a bunch of different buckets because each bucket does something differently, right? And so that is why you cannot pick one asset class to invest in. It could be great for a couple months, a couple years, but at some point it'll take a turn. And so I kind of equate it to, I don't know if anybody here is a golfer, but it's the reason why in your golf bag you have a number of different clubs, right? You have your driver to get you down the fairway. That's your big swing club. But your putter also has its use case, right? You're not going to use your driver to putt you into the hole. You're going to use your putter, right? And so that's how I think of diversification. Is it's a number of different tools you're using to accomplish different goals, but they all work together for your success. Cool. All right, so I will keep going here. Let's see, I kind of touched on this a little bit already. Okay. So I know I talked about this a little bit already, but I think that the biggest thing to think about and to understand is obviously anybody on this call, no one likes to lose money, right? We as investors, we as people are hardwired to act irrationally when we are faced with really any problem, but especially when it comes to investment problems. Money is probably the most intimate, personal thing that you can deal with, and me being in a position where I deal with it every day with people, I see some really big reactions from people, right? Um, but I think you have to overcome this process by being disciplined in your approach and being rooted in research and understanding future expectations rather than the initial perceived gain or loss. And then the next thing I'll touch on is just again this idea of anchoring, right? And so, like I said, we saw this a ton with people who experienced 2008. It was a very traumatic time. People did not know when it would end. Obviously, luckily, we were bailed out by the U.S. government, or a number of places or larger companies were bailed out by the U.S. government that helped us get back on track. And I think the market's up. I looked about 900% since that moment, since 2008, up into I believe through October. So if you had sat on the sidelines and said, because of 2008, I refuse to invest, you've missed out on a ton of growth, right? A ton of passive income or return that you could have made. So it's really understanding how to not allow certain situations or certain singular experiences affect and ruin how you think about investment success going forward. Let me see one second. I think I gotta. Yeah, I'll talk about VTSAX at the end as well. And so just again, I want to paint this picture of the stock market as, again, there are going to be times where you lose, and this is a very busy chart. I'll break it down for you guys, but there'll be times where you lose for sure. But take a look at this middle column here. And this is the returns of the S&P 500, which is the largest 500 companies in the United States. And it's an index of them and their returns on a yearly basis, right? And so you can see clearly that most times the market is up 10 to 20% on any given year. And so you can see that the market typically experiences success, right, on the long term or on a year-to-year basis versus failure or loss. And so again, I'll go back to this point that investing, you will lose at some point. That is a given. That is an understanding that you have to have coming into investing. But if you're able to be rooted in discipline and long-term success, you are going to win more times than you will lose. That's pretty much a fact. I can't say it's a guarantee. It's actually illegal in my industry to guarantee returns, but I can say more times than not, 99.99% of the time, over the long term, I would say over about a 5 to 10 year period, you were going to experience investment success rather than failure. And so when you think about overcoming some of those common investing mistakes that I mentioned, right? So the fight or flight, loss aversion, anchoring, and data frequency, how can you avoid those? Some of them we've already talked about, right? I think one of them is seeking objective advice from people or professionals in those industries. So people like myself, people that work at Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Vanguard, all those other wealth management firms and shops, acknowledging that some of those biases are real. And I think, to some degree, I'll share really quick. I think to some degree, it is really, really fair to say that there is an emotional component to investing. I think there are times where you can make shifts in your allocation or shifts in your investments to help you sleep a little bit better at night, which is totally fair. Some people are just naturally more risk averse than others, which is okay. And there's an allocation for them, just like there is an allocation for someone who's very, very aggressive. But I think acknowledging that those biases are real and trusting professional partners to help you get to a plan or help you create a plan for success is something that is so, so critical. And so relying on professionals in those industries is so key to your long-term investment success in terms of how to grow your portfolio or grow your assets in the long term. Next, I think just developing and monitoring an investment plan and creating goals that are measurable is really, really critical too. So with every single client that I work with, before we invest a dollar, we sit down and we come up with an investment plan of what do you want your life to look like in the next 20, 30, 40 years? What do you want to be able to spend in your retirement, right? If I want to say, hey, like I spend, right now, $80,000 a year, I want to make sure that when I retire, I'm able to spend that same $80,000 no matter what. And I want to make sure that there is a high level of confidence that I do that. We are able to then take those goals and actually help create a plan that will get you to those goals, right? And so those types of things are so, so critical and key when thinking about investing and thinking about long-term financial success. And then the next thing I'll kind of hit on, I know one of the things we wanted to talk about was the strength of budgeting. Budgeting is everything. Again, it should be a part of any initial plan. It's a tough thing to do, I think, to stick to a budget. But the best investors, the best people with the most financial success have some sort of plan and have some sort of budget. And it's actually probably a lot easier to create than you think. But having some sort of guide map and roadmap of, okay, some of the basics are, I know, for example, that at any given moment in my savings, I want to have probably 6 to 12 months of my monthly spend just in cash, just in a bank account, right? So that if something were to happen, if there's a doomsday scenario, I get laid off, I get fired from my job, I want to quit and look for a new one, right? I can actually sustain myself through those periods where I might not have any income, right? Um, and so again, setting up those basic budgeting building blocks are super critical to any financial plan and your long-term success in your finances. And so the strength of budgeting is super critical, and I think that has to happen before you even think about investing, because you don't want to take money that you need and put it into a market that is volatile where you can lose money and lose out on the money that you might need for your rent payment or kind of your short-term goals, right? And I'll talk about how to potentially invest money based on short, medium, or long-term goals that you have, but it really is an art and there's a science to it. So again, budgeting, super critical. There's so many templates online that you can use. We have one. I'll share it with Lucky if he wants to share it with you guys afterwards. But budgeting is so important, and it's the first thing you need to do before you think about investing or trading or anything else. So before I get into the second piece, which is more focused on actually investing in stocks and bonds and things of that nature, want to just pause again, see if there's any other questions that people had before I got into looking at why or when or why stocks are useful, when are bonds useful, all those kinds of things.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Hi, this is Monique. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm well. For someone who does not have a portfolio, do you have a starting place? Like,
Mhm.
where would I start? Not particularly a stock. I don't know if you could recommend that, but can you just point me in the right direction?
Absolutely. Yeah. Vanguard, I would say Fidelity, those are all kind of like your bigger name places where you can open up account today, basically for little to no cost. That's typically where most people start, and that is a perfectly fine place to start. There's so many resources you can utilize. Um, so many different things and areas on those websites that you can navigate to help you get information about some of the things I've even talked about today, whether it be budgeting, how to invest, Fidelity, another one, um, and helping you get to the right allocation. And you can pay a little bit extra for a consultation, even so, to talk to someone live, right, about some of the goals that you might have. So I think those places are great places to start. They've been made so much easier for the person with little to no investment knowledge to use nowadays that whether it be through their use of technology or AI even, um, it's super helpful. So I would say those places are great places to start. And thinking about opening an investment account, some of them actually have, like I said, resources to help you think about, okay, if I have X amount of money, my goal is retirement, for example, how should I be investing it, right? So I'll take myself, for example. I know when I think about retirement for myself, I know there's probably going to be another 30 to 40 years that I don't work. And so my investment plan for my retirement accounts, the money that I'm going to use in retirement, is completely different than my investment plan for maybe the portfolio or account that I'm building for my first down payment on a home, right? It's completely different because my retirement account has 30, 40 years to grow. It has 30, 40 years to experience bumps in the road, losses, wins, etc. Knowing what I know about the stock market, that it typically wins more times than it loses. Whereas in the short term, which I'll show you in a little bit here, stock market can be very, very volatile. It can be up, it can be down. Like I said, we've seen double-digit losses in a matter of days, even this year. So you have to be smart about how you allocate or invest your money based on different goals that you have for that money. And then I think someone had a question about VTSAX, which is a mutual fund. That is a great mutual fund. It's basically just a total stock market index, meaning that it takes all of the largest companies throughout the entire world and allows you to invest in it. And it goes back to what I mentioned before about diversification being so critical. And I'll loop in the day trading piece as well. Day trading is typically when people buy and sell one stock in a given day, week, short amount of short period of time, and that is some of the hardest things to be successful at, truly. Um, I'll give you an example. I had a didn't even become a client actually, but was working with a guy who was a Stanford grad, Stanford Business School, was a portfolio manager himself for years and decades. So very, very, very smart guy, had all the financial background you could ever want. Literally spent decades doing portfolio management, meaning he spent decades working with others on buying and selling particular stocks and companies. And he tried to do it by himself for his own family's wealth and lost probably over 60% of his family's wealth, sent him and his wife back to work. And those were some of the most traumatic conversations I have ever had with someone, was having to walk them through the pitfalls and bad decisions that they've made trying to day trade. And this isn't to scare you guys, but it's a real life example of day trading, of what can happen when you think you can outsmart the market or outsmart um, data or outsmart AI even. Like it's really, really hard to do. So I would caution people, without the right information, research, expertise from day trading, because if you start to day trade the wrong way and you put too much in and you don't understand um, the volatility of some of those things, it can be detrimental to your portfolio or to your investment success and your long-term financial success. So I would, I'm not saying don't do it, but maybe do it with a small portion of your assets or your money. Just, if you want to buy some of the companies that you like. For example, I love Nike, right? I've always run in Nike shoes, always bought Nike products. So there are times where I've said, yeah, I want to own Nike stock because it's just cool to have. Or a lot of times we see it with our clients when they buy, their kids or their grandkids their first stock, right? They might buy their kids their favorite company just so they can start to learn about it, right? And start to understand, how does the stock go up? How does the stock go down, etc. But I'm going to caution people from thinking that they can take all of their money and assets and do day trading, because it's really, really hard to do. Not to say that no one's ever been successful doing it, but it is a lot harder than people think it is. And you need to be rooted in discipline, information, um, and a real plan to get yourself out of that situation, because it can be hard. It can be really, really difficult. So I would say day trading is one of those things that, again, I talk to my clients about all the time. And if they want to do it, great, do it, but take a very, very small piece of the pie and do it. Do not take the entire thing yourself and think that day trading is something you can do, because stocks go up and down every single day, every single minute, every single second. And so if you're not there or around to trade when you need to, again, it can be really, really detrimental. Alexis, I think your hand's raised.
Uh, Good morning. Um, I have a traditional IRA, and I basically rolled over my like 403Bs into that traditional IRA.
Mhm.
And now I work for a school that follows a pension.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not necessarily like planning to, I don't even know how a pension works, but I don't plan to work for them for a long time. So I don't know if that would even qualify me for things like that. And then when it comes to the traditional IRA, I'm not sure how to contribute to it without rolling over. Like, I don't know if I should be contributing to it from my paycheck or after I receive my paycheck contributing to it. Do you have any?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So my first question would be, I'm assuming through your job, um, do they have a 401k set up for you, or do they have access to a 401k? Because typically that's how to get the most bang for your buck. Your contribution limits through a 401k, which is a employer sponsored plan, something that your employer, depending on who they are, typically has to offer you some sort of version for it. Um, and so that is the best way to first do any type of retirement saving, is do the 401k first. And then if you have additional money that you want to save through a retirement account, you can contribute to an IRA. The rules, depending on your income, are a little bit different. And 401k contributions, if it's a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, I'll use that as an example, um, are tax deferred. And so you don't have to pay the taxes on the money that goes into your retirement account, which is a great tool and really, really should be used by everybody that is working. Um, but depending on those limits, how your depending on your income too, I would first focus on maxing out the 401k versus your sidecar kind of traditional IRA that you rolled your 403b into.
Mm. Okay. If the employer is not matching it, does it still make sense to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think because you're still going to get that tax deferred growth, meaning that money that goes in, again, you don't pay taxes on, it's deducted from your income. But then your IRA grows tax deferred, meaning that you don't pay taxes on the growth of those assets until you take the money out. So again, I'll use myself for example. I'm 30. I contribute to my 401k every year, every month, every paycheck. And those assets right now are growing with no taxes until I am earliest I can take them out without penalty is 59 and a half. I don't have to take money out until I'm 72 because the government does want their money at some point. So I can allow those assets to grow without paying taxes on them for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Whereas if I just put them in a regular investment account, I pay taxes on the gains or the money that I make basically in those accounts, right? Every single year. And so that takes away from some of the return that I'm actually getting. So definitely makes sense to contribute to your IRA or retirement accounts first because of the long-term tax deferred growth and the compounding returns that you'll get long-term versus any other accounts that you might have.
What about the Roth IRA instead of?
Sorry, one more question. Is there a way to go straight from your paycheck to the IRA, or you have to go through the 401 or 403b first?
Yeah, so typically you have to go through a 401k or 403b from your direct paycheck. But then again, if you take that money out and you do put it into a traditional IRA, it's more so just communicating to your accountant or to TurboTax, however you do your taxes, that this money actually didn't, I already paid taxes on this money. I should get a rebate for it, when I file my taxes. So typically, again, there's the only way to deduct immediately from paycheck to retirement account is a 401k because your employer controls that. And so they're able to do that for you. But if you want it to go directly from paycheck to traditional IRA, it'll probably go to your bank account first or wherever your direct deposit is set up, and then go to your traditional IRA.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to learn about Roth IRA too, so thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, he just confused me because I know traditional is from employers, and then if you have a Roth, then it's already like taxed. So it's like what you just said was like, well, if the employer doesn't have, if you left that company and you're contributing, yes, you're already paying taxes. Yes, you got to say something, but then why continue with that and not just go to a Roth?
So typically, employers have both setups. They have a Roth traditional 401k and they have a traditional 401k. The only difference it doesn't matter where it's set up or how it's set up. Like I said, employers offer both. Your regular Vanguards or wherever you have your account set up will offer both options. It's more so about how the taxes are treated. So a traditional IRA, like I mentioned, is a retirement account where you contribute money and you contribute pre-tax, meaning there's no taxes taken out of that money, and you can contribute basically without paying taxes into that account, and it grows tax deferred. The only time you're taxed in a traditional IRA or you pay taxes on that money is when you take it from that IRA and put it into your bank account or into your personal account or your personal name. The flip side.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes, no worries.
Question on that she left the company and now it's not taking out of her pre-tax because that account was with that particular company. Like
Right.
I was still looking for that answer where
So-
if you could still get it pre-taxed from that account. If not, then should she roll over? I didn't hear that answer. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. So if you're asking basically what happens to an account if I leave an employer, is that kind of your question?
No, it the account still stays. We got that from you. It's how can you still get it from a pre-tax point of view to that particular account? If not, is it better to roll over? Not what happens.
Okay. So how it works basically, so let's say I'm working at my company now and they have a 401k set up for me and I leave that company. That 401k stays. I can roll it over into a traditional IRA. I can roll it over into a Roth IRA. I can roll it over into whatever account I want. But my new employer should also have that same setup. They should also have a 401k, Roth, both options. And so there is no, you're going to have the same setup anywhere you go, and you can roll over an account without taxes at all and just start a new account as well. And so every single setup, every single employer is going to be set up the same, unless it's a really early stage company. But for the lack of, for all intents and purposes today, think about every single employer being set up the same, where you can start a traditional IRA anywhere you go, contribute pre-tax, not pay any taxes. And then if you leave that employer, all you do is you take that original 401k account, you roll it into a traditional IRA, but then you start a new 401k. And the reason you would start the new 401k is because you can give more to that 401k versus a traditional IRA. Your employer sponsored plan has a higher contribution limit, meaning I can give $20,000 a year to my retirement account versus a traditional IRA, which is about $7,500. And so that's why I want to start the new 401k versus rolling it over from the old company into a traditional IRA and then contributing my pre-tax dollars to that traditional IRA, because you can no longer give to your previous employer's 401k because you don't work there anymore, right? So that's the difference. I hope that answered your question, but that's kind of what I understood it as.
Up next, we do have Leslie.
Okay. So here's my big question. In 1933, the government made it illegal for people to own gold. So then they confiscated all the gold, and then they repriced the gold from like $20 to $35, which devalued the dollar. How do you, your company, your peers, pay attention to political changes and modifications that are actually going to affect the value of money, especially now that money is digital and the valuations are very extreme. So when I look at some of the valuations of some businesses, they're not even making money, but they're valued at, $8 trillion.
100%. Really good question. And there's a lot of nuance there when it comes to valuations, digital currency. So I'll start with this idea of, like, let's just take the US, for example. There was a lot of discussion, I think it was last year, about the US not being kind of the safe haven of the global markets anymore, right? And so that sent the dollar into a tailspin. There was this discussion that China was going to stop investing into the US, and they were going to try to band together with a bunch of other countries and try to remove kind of this dominance that the US has had over the last decades, right? Almost, 100 years. But I think when you peel back the curtain, people realize how difficult that was to do. To remove the centralization of the US as being the safe haven, it would take so much leg power from not only China, but so many other countries that it basically became a moot point, right? And so we got to a point where that was something that was on the table at the end of last year. That is now gone. You have this idea of digital currency, right? I think it was Venezuela who basically said that their currency for the country was going to be Bitcoin. And that has not gone well, because Bitcoin, while there are a number of good use cases on a day-to-day, right, there are things that it struggles with. For example, the big idea was that crypto or digital currency could come in and kind of replace credit cards and replace all of these other currencies and modes of finance that we use every day. The issue with cryptocurrency is a credit card can process a transaction within seconds. Digital currency, it takes 10 minutes, right? So think about if the world was now delayed 10 minutes, what that would do on a global currency level, right? And so I think when it comes to currency, political discussions, there's so much being thrown around, especially right now. We have this global trade war, right, where Trump is going back and forth with a number of countries about slapping tariffs on countries and trying to get them to pay for the increase of prices in goods, trying to, in theory, move production and manufacturing back to the United States. Easier said than done, I will say. And so to disrupt the global markets like that, I mean, you look at a 2008 again, where the global markets were disrupted. Like we were in trouble. There was some real concern about could the US, could the globe withstand some of that downturn that we took and some of the beating that the just general market took, right? But I will say if we were able to withstand a 2008, um, there it's going to take quite a bit for the global currency and the way that the world works today to be disrupted because um, digital currency, it's great. Again, there are other use cases, but there are so many issues with it that would keep the larger globe or the larger dominant powers from using it. Um, there's so much going on from a geopolitical standpoint, whether it be trade wars, et cetera. The US trying to move things back to the president trying to move manufacturing back to the US or the at least in North America. But that would take so much disruption and so much chaos in the markets. Before we ever got to that point, we would have a very, very, very long runway of a plan of how to get there. And people could then plan based on that longer term plan of a shift in the global economy to make sure that we landed on smooth ground. So I think there's a lot of headlines, especially in recent years, given, whether you love him or not, who our president is, and some of his ideas and policies. But it's going to be very, very hard pressed to change some of the things that have been ingrained in the global economy for decades, to almost 100 years, like you said, back to 1933. So going back to your thought on gold is a great diversifier. It's typically seen as something that is really, really great when there is fear in the market. So if people are worried, they typically see gold as a safe haven asset because whether the dollar is here tomorrow or not, everybody wants gold. Everybody likes gold. You can trade gold bars, whether you live in the US. People know what gold is in Venezuela, Brazil, China, wherever you go, right? So gold can be used as this secondary currency. And so when there is fear in the US, when there is fear in the global markets, gold rises in value. And we've seen gold rise, I think, almost 40 to 50% this year. But I will say on a historical lens, if you look back to, I believe it is actually 1933, which you brought up, gold basically tracks on a return level like a bond, which is mid to high single digits on average.
Yeah.
Whereas stock markets, stocks are typically in those double mid, 10 to 15% range on a yearly basis. So there's always chatter about different asset classes and what's going to happen if China, takes over the AI race, which is a really big race right now. There is a race between us and China about who can dominate AI first. But at the end of the day, when you think about shifting the global economy and what it would really take, it would take literally the end of the US to some degree for that to happen. And it would take pretty much every other large power ganging up on the US and trying to take us down. So pretty far-fetched, not to say it could never happen, but a lot of things in the way of that happening.
Okay. Last question.
Yep.
Is there a way to back into how much money I need in order to have the end of my life lifestyle that I choose? So let's say I want to be able to spend $200,000 a year. I want that to be, an offset of my assets that's going to be coming to me annually. Yep. Can you figure out how much money is that nut that needs to be invested to get me that money?
Yeah. So generally the rule of thumb is about you're able to spend 5% of your assets without any fear of, no matter how the markets do, losing that money. So if I have $1 million today and I want to spend, and I spend $50,000 every single year, I should be good, right? Because that's 5% of that million. So that's how I would think about it on a very, very basic level.
Okay.
That's generally kind of the idea is about 5 to 6% of your total, nesting egg. Is what you can spend on a year to year basis without any fear of ever running out of money.
And not having to increase that.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Excellent.
And I saw someone throw on the chat, is 12% good? Yes, that's very annual rate of return, 12%, great return. Again, I think people get into this idea of, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, trying to hit home runs with their investing. It is few and far between. It's hard to do. I would say a good rate of return, depending on how you're invested. If you're more aggressive, you definitely want to average more in the double digits. But if you're a conservative investor and you are more risk averse, your mid to high single digits is probably where you're going to end up, based on your investment and on your investment plan.
Okay, thank you. Next question we have Arjun.
Hi, my name is Arjun. I just had a quick question. I was wondering if there's any benefits to investing in physical gold as opposed to a gold tracking EFT or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. Again, gold and gold bars can actually be expensive, and you have to know how to store them and keep them in pristine condition, because when you go out and trade them, they'll be graded. Usually it takes someone that works in that space to do it very, very well and to actually go out and get you the best prices. Otherwise, you're going down the street to the person with the sign that says "I sell gold," on their business, and having them try to help you get pricing for that gold, which can be, usually you're taking a pretty big haircut on it, right? I would say that the easiest and most efficient way is to do it through a gold ETF. So there's a number of them out there, like the Spider Gold ETF. I'm sure you've heard about. But I would say, again, holding gold physically is, for lack of better words, more of like a doomsday um, process of like, okay, if the dollar goes under, if the global economy folds, at least I have gold in my hand. Which, again, I'm not saying it could never happen, but again, it would take a lot for that to happen. And some people like that. Some people want to do that. Some people like holding that gold. And again, if you can keep it and store it the right way and keep it in the right condition, you could probably get a premium for it, based on who you're trading with. But I would say the fastest, easiest, cheapest, most efficient way is going to be to own it, through an ETF or through some sort of exchange on a trading platform.
Thank you.
Mhm. Cool. Awesome. So I will go, unless there's any other question, to the second part. Again, in the focus.
Alexis.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, EJ.
No, go ahead.
Alexis
No,
has-
okay. Go ahead, Alexis.
When it comes to budgeting and getting and knowing what percent you're able to invest, like, can you give some kind of target numbers for
Yeah,
budgeting? And yeah.
for sure. So I would say, when it comes to budgeting for investing, right, and budgeting for maybe kind of your longer term goals, I think first you have to go through your actual fixed expenses, right? So you think about things like your rent, car payment, insurance, whatever the case may be. You want to write those down first, make sure those are taken care of. And then beyond that, it's really allocating what you feel comfortable to. Um, some people are big travelers, right? So they want to have a bigger travel budget for some years versus others. Some people, um, like to buy clothes or shoes, right? And so I think after that, after you go through the budgeting of, hey, I want to make sure at the very, very first I have, my nest egg for my emergency expenses. So that's basically like 6 to 12 months of your monthly expenses you want to have just in a bank account for a rainy day. Once you go through the list of fixed expenses that you have, which are the expenses that will never change month to month, I think after that, it's putting maybe somewhere in the range of something similar to what you're contributing to your retirement account, maybe to your actual investment account for the long term, or really being able to say, whatever's left, I'm going to put into my investment account. I know that's a lot easier said than done, because we all see money in our accounts and we want to spend it. I know I do, for example, or at least. But again, I think at the very, very least, trying to match your savings up with having your retirement savings taken care of, and then maybe whatever you're putting in your retirement, whether it's 5 to 6 to 10% of your paycheck, whatever the case may be, doing that as well for your kind of regular investment account in addition to what you're doing for your retirement. But I would say take care of retirement saving first before just building a regular investment account. And I think I saw another.
Just to build on to that question, um, like when it comes to retirement savings first, and also debt, like, do you clear debt completely before retirement investing? Do
Yeah,
you try to do
good.
both?
Yeah, good question. I think the first thing to realize is there's some good debt, there's some bad debt. Bad debt, credit cards, especially given where interest rates are right now. Interest rates are pretty high, and so your credit cards are probably anywhere from 20 to 30% on an interest rate side. And so I'm going to say you want to make sure you take care of those bills first and to a higher degree more than anything else, because those are the things that can snowball and continue to keep you in debt and build on debt and create debt. And you don't want to get to a point where you're basically in a chokehold because of the debt you've created. So I would say those are the things that you take care of first is debt, and then retirement savings, because those are going to give you the most bang for your buck. After that, that's when you start to think about, additional savings for, a car or a home, or thinking about other longer term financial goals you have. But high interest rate debt, you want to get rid of as quick as you can. But we know there are things like good debt, right? Like if you have a really good mortgage rate right now, like some of the better rates a few years ago were in the 3 to 4% range, or lower 3% range. Like that's good debt to have, because I know if I look at it from an arbitrage basis, right? I know I can make 7 to 8% by investing my money. And I know if I have an interest rate of 3%, I'm making 4%, right? Because the 7 minus the 3. So I'm better off holding that lower interest rate debt and investing my money, because I can make the money on the arbitrage versus taking all my money, taking it out of the market and trying to pay down that 3% debt. So there's some good debt, there's bad debt. Typically, bad debt is like credit cards and things where you're having high interest rates or high interest rate loans. And you want to make sure you take care of those first, because those are the things that can snowball and really build up at a very, very fast pace. Okay. Let me check the chat, see if there are any other
I want to
questions.
piggyback on that question, EJ. So, do you recommend, um, if we have, so for example, my employer puts the retirement money for me. I don't have to touch that or invest in that. But then
Mhm.
we also have this other type of account, the deferred comp, where I
Yep.
don't pay for the taxes and it goes into the account. Do you recommend, let's say I have debt with the credit cards and the high percentages and stuff, would you recommend someone who's almost 50 take that money to pay those credit cards or just keep stacking?
So if you're asking me whether to take the money out of the retirement or deferred comp
The
comp
deferred comp,
plans,
yeah.
I would say no, because you're going to pay a penalty typically. So anytime you're removing money from a retirement account, deferred comp account, you're paying a penalty
Hmm.
if you are not a certain age. If you're not the age that you are, it's typically 59 is when you can start to take money from your retirement accounts. So I would never, ever, ever, unless it's a doomsday situation, remove money from a retirement account, because you'll pay the taxes, which are your ordinary income or whatever your tax rate is, plus the penalty for early withdrawal. So if there's ever a situation where you're debating that, for everybody on the call, I would say refrain from that as much as you can, unless you're at a point where something's got to give and you really need to do it. But that should be your last resource before you do that. But again, you do need to figure out a plan, and this is for everybody. Just figuring out a plan, an idea, or process of how you're going to take care of that high interest rate debt, because those again are the things that can keep you underwater for so long and really restrict your financial freedom. So, yeah, don't ever, or refrain from, I will say, removing money from a retirement account because of the penalties that you pay and the taxes that you'll have to owe, versus just using the money that you get from your everyday paycheck.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So kind of shifting gears again, and again, please feel free if there are other questions that come up, throw them in the chat or just raise your hand. But I'll kind of go back to, for now, just talking about stocks and bonds and how those are helpful and how to think about them over the long, medium, or short term when you're investing. Again, I think the diversification is critical, so you have to have both, but both have very, very different use cases. And so let me just share my screen again. And so for investment planning, kind of the goals, I think, will be to just, again, review stocks and bonds, why time horizon matters, benefiting from diversification. Maybe we can talk about diversifying beyond stocks and bonds and other asset classes. I know we've talked about gold and things of that nature. So talking about other things that might be helpful. And then really thinking about, how do I create a investment mix that will be beneficial to me, right? So the first thing I think I want to bring up and show you guys is the price of long-term growth always is going to have these periods, right, of uncertainty. And so you can see here, this is the S&P 500. So again, this is the largest 500 stocks in the United States, or largest 500 companies in the US from 1980 to 2024. And you can see, for the most part, right, on average, we're up and to the right. But as you can see along the way, there are some moments in time where things take a turn for the worse. But that's truly the price that you have to pay for long-term growth, right? But that also tells me, in the short term, maybe it's not the best idea to invest all my money in stocks. So there are situations in which bonds are really, really beneficial, because they are a lot safer. Bonds are very, very, I will say, for this conversation, pretty similar to cash in terms of the risk. They provide really basic income and interest, and are a lot less volatile than stocks, whereas stocks can be up and down double digits in a given year, in a given, few months, weeks. Your bonds, on a standard deviation basis, right? You're only going to be up or down a few percent at a time. So just looking at this chart too, you can clearly see that since the 1926, if you would have invested $1 in the stock market, you'd have $15,000 right now. However, on the bond side, a lot lower, you'd only have 130. And if you just kept your money in cash, you'd have $30, right? And so what I really show you this for is to say, stocks are the growth engine for your portfolio. So when you think about investing, stocks are going to be the thing that lead to you being able to double your money at some point, or triple your money over the long term, right? But there are going to be times where you want to be invested in safer asset classes, depending on your goals and your needs. And so I'll show you this chart just to say, as I've said before, stocks on a year-to-year basis can be very, very volatile, right? So best year, they were up 54% since 1926. Worst year, down 43%. So can be a really bumpy ride, a crazy ride. But we know, like I said before, over the long term, right? Over the longer periods of time, stocks typically are successful. Stocks typically increase, right? And so you look at the 15-year rolling period, average return was 11%, 20-year period, average return 11%, 30-year period, so on and so forth. You kind of get the idea, right? That over the long term, if I have a long time horizon, so if I'm investing for retirement, I want to be mostly, if not all, stocks. Like my retirement account personally is all stocks because I know I have so much time to recoup any potential losses. Whereas if I am saving for a home or I am saving for the next 5 years, I want to be invested in asset classes that are a lot less volatile. And so let's talk about bonds for a little bit. So just to give you an idea of what a bond is before I get into it, I'll take this off share screen. A bond is essentially just a loan. So basically, to give you an example, let's take Google, for example. Google issues bonds every single year. And so let's say they issue a bond and I buy it for $10,000. And Google tells me, EJ, thank you so much for your money. Every single year, I'm going to give you 5% for the next 5 years. That's great. So I get $500 for the next 5 years until that bond term ends. But at the end of that bond term, in addition to my $500, I get that initial $10,000 back, right? And so at the end of that bond term, I've got $2,500 that I've made plus my initial investment. So I've got that $12,500. And so that's what a bond is. It's a loan to someone, to some entity, to some government, municipality, where they're saying, thank you for your money. Because we appreciate you, we'll give you an interest payment every single month, every 6 months typically, or every year. And then at the end of that term, I will give you your money back as well. And so your returns aren't going to be as high as stocks, but they're going to be far more consistent with a lot less volatility and risk. And so that's why we love bonds, right? Because they have they have the ability to provide fixed income. We call them fixed income instruments because we know exactly what that income will be. And they're very, very safe, or pretty safe, I will say. Some bonds are riskier than others, but everybody has access to really good bonds in the open market. So let me share my screen again, and I will just show you on a 12-year period what bonds look like. So like we talked about with stocks, I showed you that chart before where stocks in 1 year were up, 53% on its best year and down 43% on its worst year. Bonds on a 12-year kind of period or on a year-by-year basis, you're rarely seeing negative returns. You're seeing negative returns about 7% of the time on a 12-year period, and this is going back to 1988. And I will say the benefit of interest rates, I'll kind of bring it into present day. The benefit of what we've seen with interest rates going up in the last couple of years is bonds are as attractive as they've ever been, right? So on one side, where we've seen mortgage rates increase, we've seen car loans go up, we've seen the cost to borrow money increase for us. At the same time, the cost or the benefit that we're actually able to get by buying bonds in the market has gone up as well, because bond returns or bond yields or interest rates or the actual coupon payments that they would pay us were somewhere in the 1 to 2% range, even 5 to 6 years ago. Whereas today, I'm getting 4 to 5% on my bonds, which is a pretty solid return if I know I'm going to get that no matter what, with basically no risk, right? And so that is the flip side of the Federal Reserve in the last couple of years raising interest rates, which made it really, really tough for people to buy homes or to get car loans. The beauty of it has been that there has been a lot more return to be had on the bond side. So let me pause there. Bonds can be some of the more confusing instruments to understand. So let me see if anyone has any questions on a high level about bonds before I keep going. Okay. And so to kind of wrap it up, and I know there were some other questions that I wanted to get to. I think really what I'm trying to say here is any financial plan that is going to be successful is going to take, or any long-term financial success is going to take a lot of planning. And there are a number of challenges that you will face, whether it be interest rates increasing, uncertainty of the market, tariff wars, geopolitical fears, AI bubble, right? All the things that we've talked about. But there are some things you can control, and it all comes back to your investment plan and understanding your goals and your time horizon for those investment or for those um, goals that you want to reach. And so again, short-term goals, you want to be really, really safe with your money. You want to make sure you remove a lot of risk when you invest. Whereas long-term goals, you know you can afford to take risk, and you have the time to recoup any short-term losses. And so that's where you build and implement things like stocks and things of that nature. And so um, I'll probably just stop with the slides for now because I think there were a number of questions that we wanted to get to. But also want to make sure if any of the things that I just said brought on any other questions, I answered those as well. So let me pause there, see if there's anything else that came to mind as I just kind of quickly went through those things. Awesome. All right. So I think one of the questions that I had gotten was around trusts and what they're used for. So trusts an estate planning tool, meaning they are basically a document that is written and is drafted for you to essentially allow everybody from your family to everybody else in the world to understand exactly how you want your affairs to work, right? So in the event that you get sick and you're not able to take care of yourself, for the event that you pass, there's a very, very clear document that no one can contest, no one can argue with, that clearly lists out exactly how you want your assets to transfer to family, how you want certain things to be given to certain people, when they can be given to certain people, etc. And so I'm not sure, I can't remember who asked it, but if there was a particular question you had about trust, if you're choosing between certain ones, there are a variety of different ones. Some are better than others in different situations, but at the very, very basic level, a trust is used to help you avoid going to, having there be a really big fight basically in the event of your passing, or someone's passing, about who owns what, who is supposed to get what, who is supposed to inherit what, um, who will take care of your kids if something, all of those things, right? So trusts, I will say, are a very critical tool for planning, and they will remove a lot of chaos in the event that something does happen. And it's something, especially once you have children, I think are really, really important to at least sit down and have the discussion about is, how do I want my will to look? How do I want my trust to look? If something that happens to me, who do I want to take care of? The people that I love? What do I want to give to the people that I love? All of those things, right? So it's really just an effective tool to transfer your personal assets to whoever else is in your life. Yep. So irrevocable trusts are really interesting, and they can be very, very tricky. So an irrevocable trust means it cannot be revoked or it cannot be changed. So once I put assets into an irrevocable trust, I cannot take them back. And usually they're irrevocable because I no longer have control over those assets. So typically we see this, or I see this in my world, and basically like that's a trust fund for kids. So typically, when I have clients that go through these large liquidity events, let's say they get $100 million and they say, okay, I want to make sure my kid has a trust fund. I want to make sure I give X amount of money to my family, or I want to make sure that, I set up a trust so that my kids don't ever have to pay for educational expenses, whatever the case may be, right? So if I put, let's call it $10 million into that irrevocable trust, it is there for good. I cannot take it out. It is no longer mine. It is governed. It is dictated by whatever rules are in that trust, right? So if I said that in that trust, I wanted to give it to my kid for when he turns 25, it has to go to my kid when he turns 25. I can no longer take that money back. I can no longer use it for personal use. It is out of my name. It is out of my control, right? And so I think understanding irrevocable trusts and what they're used for, um, and why you want to use it, I think is key, because you might be able to get to the same end goal without having to give up that access. And so um, there are a number of different irrevocable trusts and versions of it, but basically at a very basic level, you are giving up your right and access to that money or those assets. You are putting them into a separate entity, and whatever document was created for that trust, for that irrevocable trust, that now dictates whatever happens to those assets in that trust. So you are fully giving up that access, you're fully giving up that money and putting it into an entity that you no longer have control over. Okay, I think the last question, or the next question I got was on insurance, and I will say, um, insurance is a great tool when it's used for what it is for. Um, Typically, you want insurance to help alleviate pressure if something were to happen to you, like life insurance, right? So, insurance in any kind is for a disaster or an emergency, whether it's car insurance, whether it's home insurance, right? So, something happens to your home, you make sure you have home insurance so that there's a flood in your home or there's a fire in your home. You are protected to some degree, and there isn't some large capital or money, capital expenditure that you have to give up to help handle that. You then have an insurance company come in and usually alleviate that pressure. Typically, where we see life insurance come into play is for um, parents or people who want to make sure that in the event of their death, there is a certain amount of income that can be replaced by that insurance, right? So I'll give you an example. We had a client who was in his early 30s and he wanted life insurance so that, he was a very high earner, worked at SpaceX. And so he wanted life insurance so that in the event of his death, um, he had 20 to 30 years of income for his wife and kids to be replaced if something were to happen to him. And so I'm going to say those are the best use cases for insurance. When you start to think about insurance as a investment tool or kind of accomplishing other goals, it gets a little tricky. Um, we kind of say this joke a lot in my industry, but if I sold insurance, which I don't, my house would be a lot bigger, I'd be a lot richer because it's one of the more expensive tools to purchase in the kind of financial planning world. It's useful and it has its use cases, and mostly everyone should have it, but it's expensive to have, especially if you're not using it for the right reasons. And so when you're thinking about using, for example, universal life insurance, right? Like which you can actually invest in. Um, what people don't tell you is usually there are very high fees associated with that, and there are caps on how much you can make. While they do give you a floor of how much you can lose, there are caps on how much you can make. And so we just went through a whole exercise, right? Talking about how we typically know how much the market goes up, and insurance companies are very, very smart. They will cap you just under that, just under what they think you can make in the open market and limit your actual potential to earn, right? And so I think you have to be very, very cautious about thinking about how to use insurance and when it's useful and when it can be beneficial to you. Typically, I will say we are rarely, especially in early days for a younger clients or younger people, really using anything but whole life insurance or term life insurance, but really, really ever using it as an investment tool. So it can get really tricky. And I'm going to say, definitely if you're considering any type of insurance, like talk to an insurance professional, but just be cautious of some of the pitfalls that typically happen when you're considering insurance. There can be a variety of things that people try to sell to you that might not fit your particular situation or where you are in your life or your particular need. So I think understanding what you need insurance for and why you're getting it is super critical, and not trying to use it for something that it's not intended for. You have to be pretty cautious about it as well. Awesome. Any other questions I can answer? I think from what I wrote down, I got to all of them. Uh,
In the chat, is there a reason for a small investor to invest in dividend paying stocks?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So dividend paying stocks basically are stocks that pay out a certain amount of cash, or think of it kind of like an interest payment or a bond, like bonds pay out interest payments every single, 6 months or a year. Dividends have cash payouts usually every quarter or every sometimes month, depending on the stock. I think it depends on what you're using it for. I think it's a great income tool if you're just looking for it on an income basis and you want to build an income heavy portfolio, meaning that you want to have consistent cash flow back to you versus then relying on like the actual growth of a stock or growth of a company. If you just want the cash payments and the consistent dividends, those can be helpful. I will say definitely refrain from making it, again, what we've talked about kind of the last little bit is diversification. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Typically, dividend stocks can be good, but on a total return basis, whether it be dividends and growth on the stock, um, are don't necessarily grow as high as the market does. And so while you might be getting a 3 to 4% dividend on a stock, the stock itself is only growing 2%, right? Or 3% in a given time period, where we've seen growth stocks, we've seen some of our larger US companies grow 10, 20, 30, 40%. I mean, I don't remember what the numbers were for NVIDIA, but NVIDIA is not a dividend stock, but that is up, let's see, how much that is up this year. Up 30% this year, which typically dividend stocks don't experience that same type of growth, because the difference is, whereas dividend stocks are paying out their income to investors, typically growth stocks are taking that same income that they're getting and the same revenue that they are generating and investing it back into their company for growth versus paying it out to customers or being on the, I guess, dispersing money back to investors, I guess. So growth and dividend stocks are going to perform very, very differently, because one company is interested in growing and maximizing how large they become, which then is very, very good for your pockets if you're an investor, because they grow more and they appreciate more, versus dividend stocks, which are going to have a little bit less of a bumpy ride, not as volatile, not as risky to some degree, but are going to grow a lot less because they're not taking their income they're getting and putting it back into their company for growth. They're usually just paying it out to their investors. So very, very different use cases for dividend stocks versus all the other things at your disposal. Yes. So starting a new business, raising money is probably one of the tougher things to do, especially just given where we are in the environment. It depends really widely on your industry. But you're basically saying and going out to investors and saying, hey, invest in my new idea. And so you've got to be really, really honed in on your plan, I think. Having a business plan is super critical to show investors that you're serious when you're going out and raising money. No one, you know, when you think about why an investor is investing in you, especially at an early stage, it's because of the growth potential, right? So we've talked about stocks that are public stocks or public companies, things that have gone from being at one point, an Apple was started in a garage. I know we've all heard that story of Steve Jobs and his co-founders starting Apple in the garage, what was it, almost 50 years ago or something like that, 40 years ago, and growing it into the behemoth it is now. But everyone has started as a founder or a new entrepreneur or someone who has started a business and is now has had to go out, raise money, and get people to invest in them. I think the most successful people that do that, that go from starting a business, being an entrepreneur, starting from day one, have a really clear plan and they're solving a problem for consumers, for people like you and us. They're solving a direct issue that people have and are able to show investors that over the long term, they will be successful at solving that problem, right? And so, I'll take Tesla cars, for example. That was solving a very, very specific issue of there were discussions about how bad cars were for the environment, the upkeep and maintenance on cars, and Elon Musk had the brilliant idea of creating, these cars that could be charged and creating this entire industry basically of electric vehicles that we now see today, that has been super successful because he solved a very, very distinct problem of people wanting to be lower emissions with their vehicles, people wanting to have a lot less maintenance that went into their cars, and wanting to have the technology in their cars that they had, on their smartphones and things of that nature, right? And so, if you're able as an investor, or sorry, as an entrepreneur starting a new business, to solve a distinct problem and show a very clear path to investors of how you're going to accomplish that, that's what leads to growth. That's what leads to businesses being successful. And so, it's all about being able to clearly, um, I would say, dictate that to investors and to people that you're looking to take money from, to believe in you, to go on that journey with you, is I'm solving a plan or solving a problem and I have a clear plan to do it. And here's how I plan to do that. So anytime you're raising money, anytime you are starting a business, I think those things are critical and you have to be able to show those investors what the money's being used for as well.
Were you waiting to see if anybody else had any other questions?
Yes, if anyone does, I think a
Okay,
couple
hi
people.
there. My name is Vahola, and I just wanted to ask. So I'm a bit shy at saying this, but so I just turned 30, expecting a new job, pretty much starting all over from scratch. What would you recommend? Because I am just financially illiterate, and I'd like to, from your perspective, what would you recommend that I get started on?
Yeah, I think the first thing goes back to budgeting and building a plan. Um, Before you start investing, before you do anything, I think understanding where you are financially is really important, but also where you want to get to, right? Um, so mapping out where you are today through budgeting, um, and then saying, okay, where do I want to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years? That is going to be the most beneficial thing to you to help you navigate what you do for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I will say I've had clients who have, made a ton of money in their lives, ton of money in their careers, and I've had no financial plans. And they are always the ones that are confused or have the most questions at the end of the year or the most concerned, the most stressed out when it comes to money because they haven't sat down and actually built a roadmap and a plan of where they want to be. And a lot of that uncertainty comes from not having built a plan and built a structure of how they want their lives to look going forward. The most
Yeah.
successful clients that I have sat down, done the legwork from day one to map out where they are, where they want to be, and then are able to make very, very clear, distinct actions every single day that will get them to those goals. But it's the ones that don't have that plan, that are kind of just out there doing whatever on a day-to-day or on a week-to-week or month-to-month basis. Those are the ones that end up kind of lost, I will say, or most confused, and aren't able to get themselves to a place where they feel comfortable or confident in their financial plan going forward. So I would say that the basics of financial literacy, or the basics of starting off for financial success, is budgeting, finding some sort of template, using resources online, but also finding then professionals that you know in your network, whether they be friends, whether they be, again, resources that people you know have at their disposal, that are able to actually educate you through some of those questions that you might have, or gaps that you might need to fill. So I would start with budgeting, but then I would seek out other professionals or other people that have done what you're looking to do successfully, and ask them questions and ask them how they built, financial success for themselves. And then like I said before, probably in the beginning of the discussion, is go to your, local Vanguards or Fidelities. Those places have really, really good resources on how to educate yourself from a financial standpoint, um, and get you to the places that you want to be when you retire, and you're kind of riding off into the sunset. So
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I really
yeah.
appreciate that.
hmm Yeah. Yes. The question was, are there safe ways to use AI for investment advice? Um, you're going to start to see, and we've already seen, a number of robo advisors, is what we call them. Basically, what that is some sort of online platform that, through some sort of technology, through some sort of AI, is able to help you invest your money, which some are really great. Some are really good and can actually help educate you too on, again, based on your goals, time horizon, what you're looking to do, help you allocate your money. I think, I'm sure we've all had access to ChatGPT, which also is a great tool. I think more so when it comes to investment advice, it'll give you really, really general advice, whereas a lot of times, I will say, each situation, each client is different, each person is different. But if you're just looking for blanket kind of, you know how should I invest in the stock market advice, kind of really high level questions, AI, ChatGPT is a great resource and has a ton of information and knowledge. Even if you search, Google now, that has its own Gemini AI resource as well. So you search any question in Google, it comes up with an AI response. And so I think yes, but using that coupled with, doing your own research, talking to actual real professionals live, I think is also useful too. Mhm. So like a couple good resources on the AI investing front, like Wealthfront has one. I think Goldman Sachs has another one. So if you just search like AI investor Goldman Sachs, it'll come up with a link to a website where, again, there's some good resources online, but I would also encourage people to, one, do their own research, but also to talk to like a live, real person professional that can give you specific advice for your particular situation. Because at a high level, situations can seem similar, but everybody has their own, nuances to their personal lives, and income, expenses, etc.
Man, you don't know how long it took me to figure out how to do that. It took me to figure out how to raise money. That's not important. My question is, because of doing what you do, because of your experience and your experiences, how has what you do for a living, how has that changed or influenced your life as a person? growing up, obviously we know each other growing up and growing up, right? Like from being a young person and now being educated and now being an adult, how has this area that you're in, how has that affected you, like as far as your knowledge of money, your knowledge of money? The reason I thought this conversation was so important is because there are certain areas in our life that we all deal with that for some reason we are probably almost the least educated in, whether it's money, whether it's health. There are certain areas that are really paramount, but and we all deal with it. But for some reason, like we didn't have to have a degree to figure out what our diet is going to be, or we didn't have to, even be good at math to spend money. Yet those things like bad health or being broke, those things have real consequences. So um, a lot of us don't ever get access to someone like yourself who is skilled in that area, right? So, just from your own personal experience, how has your professional experience affected you personally?
Yeah. Uh, I kind of alluded to this before, but I think when you're dealing with people's money, it's one of the more intimate relationships you can have with someone. And so you really get to see who people are, how they react. Um, you know, and I think a lot of times, it's led me to have a lot of empathy in a lot of ways. You you have to have empathy, I think, to do this job and to do it well. You have to care, which I think to most people is a little backwards. I think the finance industry has gotten in a lot of ways this kind of selfish rap where a lot has been said about finance, I think, especially in the greed of it. And that's true. There's to some degree, there are CEOs and companies out there that are greedy and et cetera. But I think for me, this has been, I've been at my company for almost 10 years now. It's the only job I've ever had. Um, I've loved it because you really feel like every day you're helping people, no matter how much money they have. I will tell you, I've seen people, go broke. I've seen people amass 9, 10 figures in a bank account, lose it, and do it all over again. I've probably seen every scenario you could think of. I've seen the athlete um, be stolen from, and we had to help them out of that situation. Um, and so I think over that time, you realize intelligence has nothing to do with money. You could have $0 in your bank account, be the smartest person ever. You could have $100 million and not know what to do with it. Um, and along that journey, understanding that everybody's coming into this wealth journey or this wealth creation journey at a different place, from different educational backgrounds, different information. It's all led me to have to be empathetic and patient. You got to love what you do, I think, especially in this job, because there are days where it's very, very difficult. It is very, very difficult to have a conversation with a client who has lost, 10 to 20% of their portfolio in a given month or year. Um, but, at the same time, it's really great to be able to educate people from all walks of life, all lenses, all different types of backgrounds, all different income sources, etc., and actually see them go through the moments of not knowing what to do, this kind of sudden panic of I've got all this money, like I don't know how to invest it, I don't know how to create financial success for myself, my family, the people around me. They're all looking to me to be this person now that I have all this money that takes care of everybody, but I don't want to run out of it. How do I keep it? But I can't say no, right? And so I think it's led me to this point where I've realized patience and empathy is everything, and I really do feel like a coach a lot of times, or a mentor to my clients, and um, yeah, man, it's really really special. And I think again for me, doing something that I've loved for so long now, and being able to do it with the people that I've always wanted to do it with has been super special to me. But I will say it can be a tough job at times, and you have to have empathy and you have to have patience, because like I said, everyone's coming at this wealth creation journey, this financial success journey, from different areas and places and starting points.
I do see in the chat, Alexis wrote, can you talk more about what you noticed about the mindset of someone who loses the money and gets it right back?
Mhm.
That's a good one.
Yeah, for sure. Those those are some of my more tenacious clients. Um, Somehow, they are not they are not phased by losses. I have clients who are very, very aggressive, in their portfolios, which leads into their lives. People who have created businesses, exited businesses, sold it for a ton of money. Um, like I said, spent it all and have done it again. But I wouldn't say that's a good habit to have. However, you've got to be pretty much unfazable. Nothing can shake you. You have to have a really strong mindset. And truthfully, a lot of them are, like ignorance is bliss kind of mindset of just no matter what happens, nothing can affect them. Um, it's really interesting. I'm thinking of one guy right now, but yeah, you've got to be unshakable. You've got to be willing to lay it all out there, to be able to do that, because the hardest thing to do, I think, in this world is to be wealthy and then lose it all. That is a very, very tough feeling, um, and transition to go through, is having it all at one point and then going back into the places where, you might have either come from, or um, places that you don't want to be financially. Again, unfortunately, we see it a lot in the athletic space, honestly. People who have created a large amount of wealth in a short amount of time don't understand that. They don't realize that they're making 90% of the income within the first 10 years of their lives, and they spend through it. And by the time they retire, they have little to nothing. Um, and that is a very, very tough realization, I think, for people, is that transition. And so, to get yourself back out of that, um, you've got to be really unshakable, unfazable. You've got to be determined, and you've got to be hungry to the nth degree, I will say. But a lot of them, in an odd way, are just unfazed. Doesn't phase them. They're serial entrepreneurs, or people who are so good at what they do. Money really isn't. Money is so secondary in a way in their lives. So definitely not something I'm suggesting, though.
Um, what are oh sorry. What are Like I said, since most of us have never been formally educated in this space, like we are not on health or other really significant issues, yet we're living them day to day. Um, what are some? I think you kind of touched on them, but what are some um, just everyday things that people can not even necessarily do, but whether it's do, but really just think about, or just just almost like the elementary, for lack of better words, rules of just money, right? Itself, not even necessarily investing, but just day to day. Like no one's taught us how to money class in elementary school or high school, like right? Like what are just daily things about money that regular people like most of us don't know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll touch on two things. I think a lot of times, overspending, or misbudgeting, I'll call it, happens again without a plan. And so, I think about my weeks or how I try to plan ahead of, I know that if I go to the grocery store at the beginning of the month or beginning of the week, I try to get my groceries for at least a week or two at a time, because that will keep me from ordering out. That'll keep me from going out. That'll keep me from, making those larger financial decisions, not larger, but spending more than I might normally spend on a given night, because that's kind of how it snowballs. I think rarely are you ever, one day going out and buying $100,000 car and that's what puts you in debt, right? It's this little things that snowball you along the way, whether it be buying, some clothes or buying shoes, or overspending on a weekday, or going out to eat every night, or having these extravagant dinners, or plans or flights or trips, right? That's kind of how it snowballs. It's not one event. It's usually things that happen over time. And so I think when you think about your day to day, if you can pre-plan your days or pre-plan your weeks from a budgeting standpoint, it'll help keep you from making these reactionary decisions where, maybe you're driving home and you didn't get dinner for the week, or you didn't buy your groceries for the week. You're like, well, instead of cooking tonight, I'm just going to stop by, the local restaurant, or I'll DoorDash something, or Uber Eat something, right? Like, that's kind of how the little decisions from a financial perspective snowball. Is the lack of planning, whether it be eating, traveling, like all those little things that we think about. That's typically where we see people make or snowball into debt, or snowball into, quote unquote, misbudgeting, like I said. I think another thing you can do, which is a lot of what we tell kind of like our young adults, or the kids of our clients, is like, anytime you're considering making a purchase, a large purchase, give it 2 days. See if you still want it after those 2 days. See if you still have that same desire to buy those shoes, or to buy those clothes, or to buy whatever the case may be, right? Because I think sometimes you might be so energized or excited about making a purchase, but you really realize over time you don't need it, right? Or you don't really want it. You just wanted it in the moment because you saw it flash across the screen on TV, or you saw it, your friend had it, or something like that, right? But taking time with your larger financial decisions, I think, is very, very critical. Um, and not only doing that, but also looking for other ways where you might be able to find a discount on it, right? So, like, doing some research, like, if I want I'll just use Nike shoes again. Um, I might see them in a store and say, dang, I want those, and I could get them today, but I might take a couple of days and do some research and see, are there any sales coming up? Are there any sales in my area? Are there any, ways that I can get a little discount on them, right? Like, little things like that that can change the trajectory of your longer term financial success, that are little things day to day that you may not think matter in the moment, but over a longer period of time, over weeks, months, years, decades, will make a lifetime of a difference. So, um, again, it's really trying to be rooted in a plan. And, again, if you're someone that likes shopping, great, have a shopping budget at the beginning of the month. That will keep you from going over, right? And it'll keep you clearly within your budget if you plan for that at the beginning of the month. So, it's not to say, and we tell this to our clients all the time, I don't want to be the no guy. I don't want to tell you not to buy the house. I don't want to tell you not to buy the car. I don't want to tell you not to buy the clothes or the shoes or whatever. But I will give you the information and resources to make the most informed decision as possible, to say, can you afford this? Because we've mapped out our entire year together, our entire, financial plan together, to say, can you afford this, right? And usually there's a very clear answer of yes or no. So, yeah, I think it's that simple. I think it's really just taking time to plan, um, and, just doing the little things, on a day to day.
And then one more question, because I know we have one more behind me.
Yep.
Just credit. Like, just like I said, most of us just didn't grow up And so what we think we know about things, we either we don't know something exists at all, or our understanding of it isn't necessarily factually or completely correct. So just as far as the concept of credit, like credit, a credit score, what is that? What does that mean? How does that affect our life or our
Yeah.
life?
Yeah, so credit is basically your ability, how companies see your ability to pay them back, right? Higher the credit score, the more likely you are to pay them back. The lower, the less likely you are to actually pay them back. And so negative credit scores can affect you exponentially, actually, versus just not being able to access a loan or not being able to access something. But if you are able to access a loan, that rate that you pay is going to be a lot higher typically if you have a lower credit score versus a higher one. Um, Credit can be your best friend or it could be your worst enemy. And so when you're thinking about building credit, I think you have to, most of us were introduced to credit or credit cards in college at some point. And truthfully, it's predatory, right? Because they know if you're someone who's young and naive and wants to spend, they give you a credit card. You don't have to have any cash in the bank. You just go swipe a few times. And next thing you know, you've got all your favorite clothes and shoes, that you've ever wanted. But they're going to charge you an interest rate, right? And basically can kill you financially. And so you have to use credit as a tool for yourself versus allowing it to be detrimental to your financial success. And so I think when you're being introduced to credit, when you're being introduced to credit cards, when you're being introduced to loans, things of that nature, um, you've got to educate yourself. It's easier said than done, I know, but credit can help you get some of the best interest rates as you think about buying homes and cars later on in your life. Um, but to, if you haven't used it for that reason to build and to be a benefit to yourself, it can really ruin you financially. So building credit and the way you build it, it has to be, you've got to do it slowly and methodically. And you have to, again, have a plan for it, right? And so I know if I have a credit card, that's typically the easiest way to start building credit is having a credit card. Um, don't get the one with the highest limit. Don't get the one with the highest fees, especially as you're starting out. Get something that's really, really manageable that you can pay off every single month and use it that way. And even if you have to sit down and pay the bill every week, every day almost, like having the discipline to do that will help you build good credit versus having no plan and just having a credit card. Again, it feels like free money to some degree. And that is where you find trouble. That's where you can get into issues. And um, ruining your credit is like I said, it's not just bad because you owe fees on the credit cards or the loans that you might have, but it'll ruin your ability to get favorable mortgage rates, like I said, car loans, all of those things down the line. So it has kind of this double-edged effect, in addition to being a snowballing effect of if you aren't able to pay that credit card off, or you're not able to keep your credit score high, you're going to end up in some pretty high debt. So again, credit can be your best friend, it can be your worst enemy. Building it should be a slow, methodical process. It should not be something you rush into. You should have a plan for building that credit.
And we have one more last question in the chat. What should an investor do when it seems that the stock market as a whole is overvalued? Is it okay to invest in overpriced stock, or should I assume the valuations will go down and put my money in alternative assets until then?
Yep. Great question. Because that's a big talking point right now is everybody feels like the market is overvalued. And to some degree, it's pretty overvalued, meaning that the market is trading at its all-time highs pretty much almost every day or every month. So we're at the highest point the stock market's ever been in our lives since history. It continues to get higher and higher and higher. And so people are feeling, okay, like how much longer can this really last? How much longer can this really go? We've never seen the stock market have this type of run before. And so there is this feeling that things are overvalued. A lot of that coming from this huge AI boom that we've seen, a lot of it being led by NVIDIA and other companies similar to that who are investing a lot into AI. And so I think to your point, diversification again is going to be key. You're going to hear, a wealth manager or investment professional talk about some of the same things a lot. One of them being diversification. You have to be diversified to assets. So again, going back to my earlier point about the US stock market had been trading, over international markets for the last, I want to say 5 years, on a yearly basis, maybe even more. But this was a year when international markets outperformed. And so it's important to have money in different places in different buckets because you just don't know when something is going to take a turn. I will say, data and history shows that, believe it or not, the market trades at this overvalued all-time high more often than it doesn't. And so I think on average, the market is trading close or at its all-time high more frequently than it isn't. And so we're always kind of in this consistent, like I said, average over long term, up and to the right motion, where we will see points in where we go up and down on the stock market. But on average, you're going to see things go up and to the right. And so I will say this is a year where it's more prudent to be diversified and you're going to want to be in different asset classes. So whether it be even gold, right? Like I know we talked about gold. Gold's up, near 40-50% right now, in the year. So it's a great asset class to own. International markets up as well. Private credit, which is private lending, private equity is doing really well. Like all those other asset classes are things that you should have in your portfolio as your portfolio grows, maybe not today, but as it grows. And diversification is key into that long-term success. But I will say, if you are a long-term investor, the market trading at all-time highs is going to happen more often than not. And so you're okay with the volatility in the short term. If I know I'm not going to use this money for the next 5-10 years, I'm okay if it's overvalued or overpriced today because I know where the market's going to end up in the next 5 to 10 years. However, if this is money that I need in the next 1 to 2 years, I'm not putting it maybe in the stock market, right? I'm putting it into safer assets like bonds, or I'm leaving it just in cash that are less volatile on a day to day or a month to month, right? And so again, it just goes back to your goals as well of if this is money for the long term, I'm okay with taking the short term volatility. I'm okay with taking the short term risk or the long term risk. If this is money that I need today or in the next month or in the next year, maybe I'm keeping it in safer assets that don't have as much risk associated with them today because of overvaluation or overpricing in the general markets.
Lucky, can I say something?
Oh, God, no. Well, what is it?
I don't think EJ introduced himself as who he is at his company. EJ is the youngest, the only person of color who's had the position that he has. He is vice president of that company in Century City. And I know that myself and Lucky and Marcus, his other brothers on the call, we're all very proud of him. But someone had asked about, I think it was you, Lucky, about what it takes. We all know that EJ works pretty much 6.5 to 7 days a week. He's up like Lucky early in the morning. He hits that gym first, and then he gets into his office before 7. So there's a lot of work that EJ has put into this. And I know that his brothers and I and his grandmother are so proud of him, but it has come with a lot of sacrifice. So thank you, EJ. We're all proud of you.
I promise I didn't plant that. So
Thank you, moms. I love that. We gotta represent for our kids, and I love that.
The
And
rights of
Veronica was at the graduation, so she knows when all this started.
Okay, any other questions? Or we let it go down?
I think Miss Karen said something. Miss Karen?
I just said mom's rights. We have them. And thank you, family first. And thank you, young son. So proud.
My name is Vahola. I just want to say thank you for the gems that you drop, and it's so dope to see your family all in here, hyping you up and supporting. I love seeing it. So yeah,
Cool. Thank you for coming.
no problem, no problem.
I know we're late, but EJ, what do you do for your mental? I know we just heard you get up and go to the gym, but what are you doing for your mental on a daily basis?
a lot.
Aside from all those 7 weddings he went to this year.
So yeah, I do love traveling, I will say. I think you have to find spaces and time for yourself. Usually that time for myself is on Sundays, or kind of later in Saturdays, where I really try to shut it off and try to step away from the job. Because it is a 24/7 job. I have to go to the Rams game, which again is fun tomorrow, but I will be there with clients, entertaining them, talking to them about, their investments in their portfolios, all that kind of
Because
stuff. So
Jared Goff is EJ's close friend.
see, Lucky, you gotta mute her, man. You gotta mute her.
I know how to do it.
um, you can't be telling everybody who my clients are, mom. But
Don't be muting mom. Mom over here representing. She's proud of you.
No, but yeah, I think it's about building space for yourself, where you can step away from. I mean, everybody here, I'm sure, has some sort of stress in their job or high intensity piece of their job or what they do, whether you're working, whether you're a parent, whatever the case may be, right? And so you have to build in time for yourself, whether it's therapy, whether it's the gym, whether it's blocking out time to just be alone and by yourself, and decompress. So again, my time is usually on Sundays or kind of later in the day, Saturday, where I take time to not do anything, like really, like truly not do anything besides just sit down and lay down and on my couch and watch a TV show or not answer my phone, not answer an email. So um, I think it's about building space for yourself and for you, whatever that means to you. Whether it's reading a book or, like I said, traveling, going for a drive, going for a run, whatever that is, right? Whatever that looks like to you.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions, anyone? Okay, Veronica, you want to say?
I just want to say thank you, EJ. Today was amazing. It was definitely a different angle of the Mentality Club. We were able to learn a lot from you, and just even think about things that we wouldn't have otherwise. You're a wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate, your time more than anything. So thank you. And yeah, you guys, we do this every Saturday. So today Coach Lucky took a little back seat, and we're planning to do guest speakers as such, maybe every quarter or so. Coach Lucky kind of has more of an idea of that. But every Saturday we do this. So if you guys are not subscribed, you can, I'll put the link on where you could subscribe to get the notifications. And if you are interested in working closer with Coach Lucky, we do have the youth circle, and I'll also add that link in the chat.
EJ, anything you wanted to say?
No, it was really great to be with you all today and super engaging and fun conversation. I love this stuff, as you can tell. I can talk about it forever. So fun for me to be able to kind of come share some of the knowledge that I have with you guys. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I want to personally thank you for coming on. You're the first guest I ever had on the Saturday calls, and I take it seriously. You know how we roll. You and I,
Mhm.
I respect, but definitely thank you for coming on and helping, supporting all of us, learning how to do something in an area of life that most of us don't really get any formal education on, right? Or help or support or know anybody who knows what they're doing, what they're talking about, much less be good and successful at it. So thank you for coming on and helping all of us and supporting all of us. It's an honor and pleasure and privilege to have you here. Thank you all for showing up, and I trust that this was good for all of us. And so we'll be back next week, and I'll be back to yelling and ranting and raving and sweating and everything else, like I do some kind of Baptist preacher somewhere. But this was a wonderful day, a wonderful time. Thank you all for showing up. And EJ, my brother, thank you. I appreciate you, love you, respect you, and keep up the good work, man. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you all for showing up, and happy Saturday, everyone. And we'll let you guys go and get on your way. So happy Saturday, everyone.
Thank you all.